Hello and welcome to Raw Chatter. I am your host speaking, Vicky Midwood, and I want to welcome you to this episode. Again, I'm going solo. It is all about a subject that I think many of us need a little bit of help with, especially if we have come from a background where we believe that talking positively about ourselves is somehow big-headed or showing off. Now, obviously, it depends on the age that you are, but I think we've still got that kind of language going around. And the confusion lies is where is the line between you being positive and being confident about yourself and who you are and your achievements and your worthiness, and the other side of that coin, which many people dislike, which is being big-headed or a show-off. So let's dive in to self-compassion. The reason that I think so many people struggle with this is because the lines are very, very blurred, and how we come across to other people is something that those of us who have struggled with addiction in any way, shape, or form, which is often because we don't know how to regulate our own emotions. We don't quite know what to do with our feelings, or we struggle with something like ADHD, which means that we're looking for a dopamine hit often and frequently to help us to just function. Or it may be that we've just learned a certain way of behaving and talking about ourselves that will keep us safe. But either which way, if you're ticking any of those boxes, you'll know that being critical of yourself, making jokes at your own expense so that you make people laugh with you rather than at you, can often be something that we've learned to help us feel safe. And this is why it's such a challenging topic, and it's such a difficult thing for people to work on. And that's why it is something that it's consistent in the work that I do with all of my clients. Every single person that I work with who has issues around body image, how they use food or alcohol, overcompensating with exercising, trying to punish themselves to believe that if they are harsh on themselves, somehow it will make the results more worthwhile, that people will respect them more. And it's a kind of a little bit of a warped way of thinking to the majority of people, that the nastier we are to ourselves, the better we're going to be. Now, here's what we've got to take on board. Some self-criticism in the short term can be motivating. And I think this is why people struggle so much, because it's like, so how much is too much? What is the right kind of amount? And so it's context based, and it's how are you utilizing that self-criticism? Because sometimes if we can be more compassionate, that can be a more powerful driver. What we do know is, as humans, we are driven to move more through pain than we are to head towards pleasure. So what do I mean by that? Well, normally, if somebody's wanting to change something and they are really at that point where they're just like, that's it, I'm done. I can't take this anymore. I've had enough. That's usually because it's just too uncomfortable. It's too painful. And that is the kind of the push and the driver that is required to get them to do things differently, to finally take action. If somebody kind of presents a bright, shiny object over here that says it's all going to be kind of fluffy and light and it's all going to be marvelous, the pull of that is not really as strong as the push or the shove from something being painful. Now, again, as always, it's not always the case for everybody, but for the majority of people, moving away from pain is a more powerful driver to change than moving towards pleasure. However, if you're only in a little bit of discomfort, then pleasure that you can imagine, you can feel, you can taste, you can imagine yourself in this better place, that can also be massively powerful. And that's kind of what manifestation is all about. It's about you energetically taking yourself to an even better place than you are now. But when you're in a place where you feel shitty about yourself and you don't like yourself very much, just even being able to imagine what it would feel like to be different and to be somewhere else and to behave in a different way is, for many, and I was one of these, not even possible, because we have no reference point. We've always criticized ourselves. We've always felt criticized by others. Whether they actually did criticize us or not, it doesn't matter. But we felt that we weren't good enough, that we weren't deserving. And that is the common denominator across every single person that I work with. Anxiety often comes from, what will other people think of me? Right? How will it be received? What will people say? What if I upset them? What if I get it wrong? Right? Anxiety is also something that gets created from the fear of being made to look silly, being embarrassed in front of others. And so if I make fun out of myself first, then it's okay if you laugh at me because I'm the one in control. Yeah. And often that's what people do when they talk about them getting through their school days by becoming the class clown, because that was their way of protecting themselves and not recognizing that actually it was all boiling down to this fact that they didn't feel deserving, worthy, or good enough. And for whatever reason, and there's multiple reasons, but what we do know is, as a short-term driver, self-criticism can push us to improve and to grow, and it absolutely can. But if it becomes your consistent daily narrative, then it's going to beat you down. It's going to make you feel depressed. It's going to put you in a place where you're thinking, just what is the point? Why am I even here? Why do I bother? That's what consistent and continuous self-criticism can do. Now, when we can shift criticism for compassion, when we can start to recognize that we are a human being, and by default, human beings are flawed, right? We can start to see things through a different lens. And that's why I've created a self-compassion challenge, just to help people to understand it doesn't take a lot for you to begin to be compassionate with yourself. Now, a lot of people think being compassionate is the same as self-care. And a lot of the things that you do to show compassion to yourself may indeed tick the box of being self-care things as well. But the people that I work with who struggle with weight and food and confidence and alcohol and feeling compelled and obsessed to turn to these things as a way just to manage stress and deal with life, they don't necessarily recognize that actually the way that they are speaking to themselves about themselves in their own heads is actually then trickling down, and people are starting to treat them in the way that they expect to be treated, i.e. not with a great deal of respect. And so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that you end up, to some degree, actually getting the criticism that you're so trying to avoid, because you're trying to tick every box. You're trying to be a people pleaser. You're trying to be perfect in everything that you do. And if you beat yourself up with your language, if you call yourself an idiot or stupid or good for nothing consistently, you're going to start to believe that that is who you are. And we like to live up to our identity. This is what your brain does, right? It works on instructions. So you're then going to end up doing things that reinforce the belief that you have. So you will end up being clumsy, and you will end up saying silly things, and you will end up doing all of the things that you tell yourself off for doing, because you are constantly focusing on what you're doing wrong, what you're doing badly. So when we can start to shift that, when we can start to do things that actually help us to feel better, when we reduce the criticism, what we can then do is start being a little bit kinder to ourselves. Now, I'm not talking about going from hating yourself to suddenly loving yourself. That is not going to happen overnight. And for a lot of the clients I work with, we just got to start with respect, because they don't even like themselves. So if you can start with respect, then that is a way of just beginning to tickle the surface, if you like, of being self-compassionate. Being compassionate actually promotes emotional resilience because it means that we're better able to cope with our feelings and recognize what they are. If you're not consistently calling yourself names and saying bad things to yourself internally, it can help you to actually be more resilient and recognize that you can actually deal with and cope with a lot more than you give yourself credit for. It's just that you've never given yourself the opportunity because you haven't been compassionate enough to give yourself a little bit of space to do that. And so the things that I ask people to do on the challenge, the self-compassion challenge, is to do things like just be reflective. Be reflective on how are you thinking, how are you feeling? And ask yourself questions like, why am I deserving of patience? Because that's called an affirmation. And very funny when I was putting the challenge together and I was just double checking. I was putting in affirmations in Google and it insisted on changing it to affirmations. It's as though in Google's world, affirmations don't exist. And affirmation is massively helpful. It actually helps you to use a different part of your brain that is searching then for the solution, for the answer. Whereas an affirmation is just you affirming something that you may or may not believe and you keep repeating it. And for some people, affirmations work and they're very, very powerful. But for a lot of people, they don't because they say the words, I am deserving. But in their head, what are they doing? Yeah, but I don't really believe it. Yeah, but I'm not really. Okay, but when you use affirmations, you're asking the question, why am I deserving of more kindness and compassion? And that means that your brain now is going to search for a solution, a positive answer to that question. And this is where working with your brain is something that I help all of my clients to do and that I recommend that you do, especially if you know that your brain works slightly differently to other people. So if you are on that spectrum of a neurodiverse brain, then recognizing that trying to do things in the same way that people who haven't got a similar brain to you do things is just setting yourself up to be stressed out and anxious because your brain doesn't work like that. So work with it instead of against it. And this is where affirmations come in. They are really super duper helpful. It also encourages self-support, right? Because one of the things that people tend to do when they are super critical and just not compassionate with themselves, so they often end up relying on other people to give them the answers, right? In other words, they haven't learned to be self-sufficient. And so if you're always looking for reassurance, am I doing this right? Is this okay? Would you mind awfully if, right? If we're using that kind of apologetic, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve to be on the same level as you language, then we're not actually able to create any kind of level of trust within ourselves or self-support, because you're always looking externally outside of you for somebody to kind of hold you up and say, yes, no, you're doing okay, you're all right. Or alternatively, push you down. In other words, what you're saying is the way that I'm feeling and behaving is all reliant on what other people say or do. And that is a disaster when it comes to self-worth and self-confidence. So by improving your emotional resilience, by being compassionate, by improving your ability to self-support, by reducing your self-criticism, we can actually start to build a sense of safety. And we've built a sense of safety, many of us have, by being critical, right? By feeling we weren't good enough, because it kept us pushing forward and kept us trying to do more things in the hope that we would be accepted, we would be good enough. But also it's very familiar. It's very familiar, and familiarity equals safety. So we need to keep in mind that when we're building a sense of self-compassion and therefore self-worth and I do deserve, we have got to allow ourselves to recognize that we need to create another sense of safety. And that is by allowing ourselves to process negative judgments, but without harsh self-judgment. And this is why there will be people who will judge us, right? Based upon their stuff, on their programming. They just will. None of us were brought up the same way. Not like I need to tell you that. All of us have come from a different background. And therefore we all have different programming. And yet so many of us believe that everybody thinks in the same way. And therefore, if people have different opinions to you or they believe different things, the self-critical people go, I must be the one who's wrong. They must be right because I'm always wrong. So it's this critical negative language that actually doesn't allow you to build a sense of trust in your own decision making. So once you start to be compassionate and kind to yourself, not only do you start to feel better, you will reduce your anxiety, but you'll start to build that sense of trust. And that sense of trust in you is going to help you to feel more safe. And this is really what it's about. If you can develop a healthier relationship with yourself, and by default, if you have a healthier relationship with yourself, it means that you're going to create healthier relationships with other people. Because when you are somebody who is not kind to yourself, who is not compassionate, you will allow other people to treat you badly. And they do. And you will attract those people who like treating you badly, right? You are a narcissist's dream. Yeah, because you'll take it and you won't answer back, and you will allow yourself to be manipulated and pushed and pulled in all directions, and you won't complain about them. You'll think it's all your fault. And so this is why practicing compassion with some just really simple things, like being grateful for what you have right now, recognizing where you are right now. Yeah, we can all strive to do more and to do better and to have a growth mindset, but stop, smell the coffee if you like, and just go, you know what? I'm grateful that I have the stuff that I do actually have. Think about those affirmations and start to ask yourself different questions about why it's important for you to give yourself the time and the space to do the stuff that you need to do for you, and not always push your own stuff to one side to prioritize somebody else. Think about how much less stressed, how much less anxious you would be if you weren't chasing your own tail, people pleasing, and actually were doing the stuff that would move the needle for you. Also think about how you can allow yourself to take some space without you telling yourself it's a waste of time and looking after me is just like a bit woo-woo and it's all a bit like meh and pansy or whatever crazy words I've heard people use, and selfish. Looking after yourself is anything but selfish, because if you don't look after yourself, who the hell is going to? And I don't know about you, but I don't really want to be around people who don't respect themselves enough to actually take care of themselves. I just mean on a basic level, like make sure they get enough sleep, make sure that they have got a decent haircut, that they have a shower, that they haven't got skin that looks like old leather because they can't be asked to moisturize it, or they eat such a bad diet that their skin's all kind of flaky, or they've got all kinds of issues going on, right? Those are not the people who I find attractive and I want to spend my time with. And so why would you not look after yourself? And that's what I want to leave you with on this one. I want to leave you with a question, right? Why wouldn't you be kind to yourself? Why wouldn't you be self-compassionate? Because we were all born into this world, right, as babies, pretty much damn equal. We all cried when we wanted food. We all cried if we needed our nappy changing. We all cried if we needed to feel human contact and to feel safe. We all did those same things. It all went a bit tits up and a bit pear-shaped because of the environment that we were born into, the energy that we were living in, the words that we heard being said. Even as babies, you don't necessarily know the language, but you understand the energy and the meaning behind it, and the stuff that we saw. And the programming then that we had, you know, throughout our childhood is the stuff where we've learned either to criticize ourselves because it keeps us safe, it serves a purpose, or to criticize ourselves because we just do not have the skill set to communicate well, or the skill set or the emotional resilience to be able to handle how we feel. And that is a skill that we need to learn. So self-compassion is a skill that you can learn. It takes practice. And I've created a little challenge that has just 5 steps to it, where you can implement each step and you can slowly but surely practice those steps on a daily basis, and you will start to feel naturally calmer, more relaxed, less critical of yourself, and therefore much more able to do life well. And isn't that what we all want? To actually enjoy while we're here and not pretend that this is some kind of a dress rehearsal, because as far as I know, it's not. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a person who sits on my deathbed, or I don't want my legacy to be, oh, she was a lovely lady, it's just a shame that she didn't like herself very much, or oh, she was a really kind person, it's just a shame she was so horrible to herself. I don't want that to be my legacy, and I don't think you want it to be yours. I want to be someone who is remembered as being kind, compassionate, caring, and thoughtful to both herself and others, so that she could help herself and other people live the best life possible while they're here on this planet. And that's where I'm going to leave it for you, folks. If you do want to do that challenge for yourself, then there is a link to the download, and just grab it, right? And you just can start literally straight away today. Start that challenge, because it will make a difference, and faster than you may think, if you take the steps every single day. And that's all I have to share with you today, folks. On that note, I want to say thank you, as always, for watching and listening. If you do like what you've seen and heard, do give me a thumbs up, give me a like, do subscribe to the channels if you haven't done so already. And if you think that this is helpful to somebody that you know, please do point them in the direction, give them the link, and let them have a listen too. I just want to leave you with my usual. We only have one body and one life, as far as we know. Look after that body, because it is looking after you. Take care of yourselves. Until next time. Bye-bye.